terms of achieving an objective, how do we actually get this system out there deployed in a way that meets the security needs that we all have?
Terry, can you give us an example of a private-public partnership that has really worked well?
Well, I think we've done a number of public-private partnerships, particularly around this question of communication and making sure that we are aware if there are issues. You know, in the cases of, you know, where there is a breach, very often our notification actually comes from one of our partners who's detected it before perhaps we've even detected it. There's as much that communication as there is government-to-government communication. But I think the challenge going forward as we look at what does public-private partnerships, what do they really mean? And I think, Michael, you can relate to this. We purchase so much, both in terms of hardware, software, services. The real question for us becomes, you know, when does sort of the scrutiny around how we're protected in that hardware, software, and services become a part of our decision to buy? And if it is, how does that really change the relationship, and where does that advantage or disadvantage some of our private sector partners? So I think those are some of the questions that we're going to get into when we really talk about not only the broader concept of how do we all work together, but the actual commercial relationship, if you will, and how we use that to really drive all of us getting to the next level of being better.
Did you want to add on to that, Melissa?
I think that the power of procurement, when the government has got a close to $80 billion IT budget, is an effective buying power to drive market standards and higher security posture. So I absolutely agree with Terry.
Michael, do you think, as somebody, I mean, you know, your name is synonymous with computers and technology and all that. Do you think we're overestimating the threat of terrorists using this technology?
I don't really think we are, unfortunately. I think you know, we'll see more threats here, and you know, unfortunately, I mean, a point's already been made this evening that this system that we're using, when it was constructed and conceived, wasn't intended to be used in the way that we're now using it. And so, you know, therein kind of lies the fundamental problem. And so, you know, there's a lot that has to be done to, you know, build security in and ensure that you know, we can really protect our critical infrastructure. You know, there's an enormous amount that we all rely on that, you know, again, can be, you know, unfortunately tampered with.
Well, how does the government, what's the government's view of that, Phil? Is this the greatest threat to our security that we face right now?
I don't know that I'd say it's the greatest threat. You know, I think we both overestimate and underestimate the threat. I agree with Michael completely. We do broadly underestimate the level of seriousness of the threat, the scope of risk we face to critical infrastructures and to information systems, and too often the level of awareness of the threat is not sufficiently broad, and in those places where it's deep is somewhat ephemeral. So we've got to work through that. But at the same time, it's important not to demonize the technology. And you occasionally read stories in publications that are about, you know, the internet is no one but thieves, pedophiles, and, you know, people committing espionage. And that's just not true. You know, the vast majority of people using the internet are good people. It's just too hard to secure yourself and too hard to protect your family. And we need both public-private partnerships and enhanced technology to make that easier to do.
Well, let's just start at that end and come down the line. Who should pay for cybersecurity, Terry?
Well, I think cybersecurity is a responsibility of everyone. I think one of the challenges, back to the point around what's the greatest threat, if you look, for instance, at the things we look at in state government, very often the most critical threat is us, in the sense that, you know, we have to be sure that we're using the technology correctly. We need to be sure that we're protecting. And so it becomes really a question of us as the creator of the technology in terms of applying it, bearing some of the cost. I think clearly the private sector as well. And then I think also organizations like this that really can bring people together and really look at the issue cross-boundary and cross-functionally. You know, we're all a part of it because we're all affected by it. And I think the interesting thing is that while it's an ubiquitous issue, if you will, across industry and across all of the sectors, it's also a very personal issue because of the identity piece of it. And so I think everyone bears a responsibility, and therefore everyone bears a piece of the investment to make sure that we're all protected.
I don't think I can add anything to that.
Yeah, everybody has a role to play in this. I think, you know, another issue, maybe we're dancing around a little bit, you know, when you talk about cybersecurity, it suggests that, you know, everyone involved is only playing defense. It's probably not the case. There are probably some playing offense and defense, and then it raises very interesting questions like, does our offense know what our defense is doing? Does our defense know what our offense is doing? Maybe a problem.
Melissa?
Well, I think that it's however we think about offense or defense, this cost is being shared across between the consumer or the business or the government. And I think what's essential is that governments need to start to look at what are the market incentives that can be created in order to help facilitate more security being built into the infrastructure and enabling more secure transactions as we're moving forward.
And what would some examples of that be? I mean,
Of a market lever?
yeah.
Well, you can have tax incentives. You can look for ways to pool research and development dollars, not just with the government, but with the private sector or government to government. Worst case, you can look at regulation. But there are a whole host of market levers that could be used to help bring solutions to the problem.
Yeah.
Let me add a little something to that, because I suspect everybody on the panel would say that we want to look to the market for solutions wherever we can, because innovation can drive security. One of the grand challenges, I think, in this space is to actually enable that. Markets make good decisions when there's information that they can make decisions about. If there's a lack of information, markets don't make good decisions. And this is one area where we have insufficient information. Too often decisions about security are between, the battle of the marketing giants between one product and another product, and it's a spectacularly uninformed decision. If we actually want to move to a market that drives enhanced security, we've got to go to data-driven decision making, which means we need real data, real metrics about what security is, what's effective, from both a product and a service and a practice perspective.
Let me just throw this out to the panel. Where will all this be 10 years from now? Terry, where does this go? What is the next step? What's the next thing that's going to happen that we're all going to say, wow, I never thought that would?
Well, I can give you my wish list. Maybe I should give you my wish list more than anything. It goes back to something that Melissa was saying. I think what I'd really like to see is that we're not talking about security as an afterthought or as an add-on or as something that we need to look at different from the way we look at technology overall. That rather it's a huge part of what we think about, that it's built in up front, that we're thinking about all of the aspects of security prior to any kinds of technology deployments we do, any kinds of products that we deploy. But I still think that it is going to continue to be sort of the norm in terms of our discussion, that it's going to be a part of the way that we look at just overall public safety and all of the other things that we do to protect everyone, particularly in my sense from a government standpoint, rather than it